guys. Welcome to the Social Block, the podcast where we explore the intersection between blockchain technology and society. Together, we'll take a deep dive into how this new technology shapes our institutions, our individual lives, our culture, and hopefully paves the way for a more equitable and empowered society. I'm your host, Magy, and before we start today's episode, I want to thank each and every one of our 55,000 listeners. We honestly weren't even imagining that many of you. Thanks so much for listening, and special thanks for those of you who took the time to email in or ping me on social media. I did read your emails. I am kind of working through them and thinking about your suggestions. A few people asked about translations of the episode. What you can do is really quickly go to YouTube and click the subtitles. The CC, the automatic ones. And then from there, go to settings and click the auto translate, and you can get it in almost any language. I know it's not perfect, but I think it'll definitely help almost anyone kind of get the gist of the episodes. And I'm really happy that you guys are listening. A couple people asked about Google Podcasts. So currently the podcast is live on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, but we are working on Google Podcasts and it should be out really soon. One person asked about a taxation on crypto episode. I will definitely do one for you. Let me just find a good specialist who will be able to address the topic properly, because it's one of the ones that terrifies me. I definitely have no idea what I'm doing. So that's pretty much it. As with last time, you can email us on socialblock@nexo.com, or you can find me on Twitter, or X as it is now branded. I'm at Hristova Magy. It's spelled quite specifically. You can find it in the description. And beyond that, I think that's all our housekeeping. So we can move on to today's episode, which is Will Blockchain Blur Country Borders, with Esteban Villegas, CEO and co-founder of Zulu. Hi, Esteban. How are you doing?
Hi, Magy. Good morning to everybody. And thank you so much for tuning in to listen to this amazing episode.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us, especially so early from Colombia. So in 2 sentences, do you want to introduce yourself and Zulu?
Yeah. So I'm Esteban, CEO and co-founder of Zulu. I created Zulu about a year and a half ago with my 2 co-founders. We had just stopped working at a startup that was very rapidly growing in Colombia. We were one of the first employees. And we actually wanted to focus on building a cross-border remittances app for Venezuelan migrants in Colombia, because there's I think over 6 million people had crossed the border at that point. And it's very expensive to send money internationally. And I thought, with blockchain, we can solve that. And previous to that startup, I had worked at UBS, the largest Swiss bank that just acquired Credit Suisse. I'd worked with very wealthy families, and I said, if we use blockchain technology, we could give these tools that very wealthy families have. We can bring it down to immigrants that have basically no net worth and no assets to their name. So that's a little bit on how we created Zulu. Aside from that, I was born in the U.S., grew up in the U.S., but I've lived the majority of my lifetime in Colombia, which is where we created Zulu for the rest of the world.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. That was a really good intro, actually. So as people are probably starting to catch on, this episode, Will Blockchain Blur Country Borders, is going to be a lot about cross-border transactions using blockchain technology and with cryptocurrency, seeing as that's what Zulu specializes in. And I first thought maybe, Esteban, you could give our listeners kind of an idea of what we're referring to when we talk about cross-border transactions.
Yeah. So cross-border is the very sexy or unsexy, depending who you are, name that we use for people that send money across a border, right? So if you are a business that sends money from the US to Mexico or from within the European Union, anything that crosses a national border, that's what we call a cross-border transaction. And they're usually very expensive.
So who is it sexy for and who is it unsexy for then?
I think it's very sexy for everybody that works in the industry. But I think we get very accustomed to very specific terminology that when you speak to outsiders, they find it very dull and they're like, what are you talking about?
Oh, it's a terminology thing. I was kind of hoping that there would be like two groups, people who like it and people who are like benefiting from this, and then people who think it sucks because it's expensive to them.
No. It's financial nerds and non-financial nerds.
So then what are the main features of cross-border transactions, and how can blockchain help make them better?
So the vast majority of cross-border payments are done via a balance type system. And so we usually call them SWIFT transactions, but SWIFT is really just an encryption technology for sending messages. So if you've ever sent money across a border, let's say you're sending money from Europe to the United States or to anywhere around the world, you're usually going to get asked by your bank, hey, who do you want to send the money to? What amount of money do you want to send? And what's the SWIFT code? So you'll try to figure out what the SWIFT code is. And it's not usually that straightforward, but it's like a WhatsApp group for banks. They just send messages between each other and they tell each other, hey, this person is sending this amount of money to this other one. What happens is the technology is very outdated, and it's very, very, very slow. So even countries that are bordered, they're right next to each other, and that might use the same currency. It can still take you 1 to 2 days to send money from one country to another, which is ridiculous if they use the same currency and they speak the same language, and they're right next to each other. So at the end of the day, it's just like a balance of international payments, and that's usually what ends up fixing the next day currency trading rate. But it's very slow and antiquated, and it could really be improved, right? So I think one of the global tendencies is countries developing instant payments within their countries. And I think the next trend will be, okay, let's build instant payments across countries, right? That it can really, really be global. So
is an example of like instant payments within a country, I think it's called Pix in Brazil that they built, that basically it's like an instant payment situation going on for Brazil. The central bank in Brazil built it. And I think like 70% of Brazilians are actually using it, and they can make like instant transactions within like the space of a day, even if it's not a business day, which is nice. It's so is that kind of what you mean in terms of those systems?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's a couple of examples. So there's Pix in Brazil, there's UPI in India, and now in the US, as of this month, we now have FedNow, which lets you send instant wires in milliseconds, and that really is like really good technology. But now you have to coordinate.
Like, how does blockchain take that to the next level, especially on cross-border? Because this is just within the country.
Exactly. So that's a really good point. And basically, the way that I think about it is every country has their own financial system. So and this is obviously not a blockchain, but imagine they have their own blockchains, right? So one country is on Ethereum, the other one is on Bitcoin, the other one is a layer 2, the other one is Cardano or other, right? They're all on different blockchains, but they just can't talk to each other, right? That's why they have to use these SWIFT encryption methods, which would be those bridges, but they're extremely slow, and they're very outdated, and nobody has really tried to put them all into the same system. So what Zulu does is specifically that. We help you get your money from one country to another as quickly as possible. And obviously we leverage blockchain and stable coins to do that, right? It's that very efficient bridge that lets you send money from one layer to another.
Awesome. I think that's like a really good way. I think you just explained TradFi to people who are in crypto and don't get TradFi, which is awesome because that's totally me. So I wanted to talk a bit about as well, like Zulu's clients. Like you mentioned yourself, most of them are from the Latin American region. And it's a very interesting region. I pulled out some numbers for Latin America, and it's like about roughly 40 or 50% of the population is unbanked or underbanked. So we're talking about adults without bank accounts or without credit cards. And at the same time, you have this cash is still king situation, but at the same time, remittances are a main source of their cross-border transactions. And like LATAM is, I think, also probably the biggest region in the world in terms of like how much remittances they have. And like remittances have been increasing in Latin America and the Caribbean by 26% or something like that over, the last year. And, that's a lot. So that's people who are underbanked, who are also making a huge amount of cross-border transactions that tend to be costly. And I thought that was interesting because it also speaks to the fact that people in LATAM are looking for fintech solutions like crazy. Like over 50% of them have tried like an app or something like a fintech app or blockchain transactions or something like that. So obviously there's a huge addressable market because these people need it. They're underbanked and they're paying these like really high up to, 6%, I think was the number of fees for, the old brick and mortar style cross-border transactions. And even though there seems to be a lot of people, hopefully not the same 50% that are banked are the 50% using crypto apps and blockchain solutions, hopefully. But there seems to be like a huge hunger for that, and Zulu's feeding that. Like, can you tell us a little bit about your clients in Latin America?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think it's this tendency called leapfrog generations. So for example, in China, the use of credit cards is relatively small because WeChat was very immediate and offered people a way to send money instantly. Or in Africa, and sometimes in many places here in Latin America, we don't usually have like house phone numbers. They're not very common. We just skipped on to cell phones, right? Or we eliminated them very, very, very quickly.
It's like Africa with wireless internet. They skipped wired internet and they went straight to wired.
Exactly. Yeah, or not having computers. You have no technology, and then you immediately have a smartphone. Exactly. So I think that's what's happening with fintech in Latin America. There are a lot of unbanked people. So there's been a lot of like TradFi solutions that have actually been quite positive to bank this population. Very easy, low deposit account values. But I think crypto can really be one of those solutions that can solve a lot of pains. I don't know if Latin America is the best place for crypto, simply because maybe crypto was introduced here a little bit too late, right? So there's a lot of power users, but I would be lying if I said, there's 200 million users in Latin America that actively use crypto every single day. I think there's other territories where that tends to be used most. But there are a couple of cases where, this has been a great solution. So I'll give you a couple of numbers. When we were talking about remittances and the power that they have in economies, one of the reasons why El Salvador legalized Bitcoin as legal tender was because 33% of their GDP was dependent on remittances. So that meant that, and the global price for accepting a remittance is between 7 or 8% on average. So that means 1/3 of their GDP was being taxed by 7 or 8% every single year. And that's just unacceptable for a very, very emerging economy. So that's one of the reasons why they legalized Bitcoin was, well, now these family members in the US or wherever they are can send over Bitcoin, and our citizens can, use it very easily, and it will be it will be legal tender. So you can use it to pay at, shops or supermarkets and stuff like that. So that's one of the power use cases for it. And going back to like how we started Zulu, we wanted to focus on Venezuelan immigrants, because if you're not very familiar, this has been like one of the largest migrant exoduses in the world. Millions of people leaving in under a year their country, right? Because of the dictatorship, and there was like a power struggle, and there were multiple things happening, and the currency was extremely devalued, and there was hyperinflation. So quite literally, I remember this was like 2017, the highest point of it. Prices would be updated like on an hourly basis. I mean, if you want to buy milk, if you went at 1 p.m., there would be a different price at 3 p.m. It was a very impressive thing. So it would have been awesome if crypto would have been created maybe 5 years or 10 years earlier, because these people would have absolutely adopted it immediately. Nonetheless, there are a lot of Venezuelans that use crypto know how to use it very, very, very well. So it's one of these use cases where, maybe in the US you wouldn't use it, or in Europe you won't use it for like daily transactions, but there are a couple of countries out there where, crypto is a very common means of payment.
So what about specific use cases for Zulu? Like, what do people use Zulu for most?
Yeah. So the prime focus of our business, of the customers that we acquire, are businesses. We worked with immigrants. We worked with 5 countries. So our app is available in, I think, Mexico, Chile, Argentina, Venezuela, Colombia, Peru as well. But we noticed just the strength of our business was with cross-border payments for companies. So these are companies that on average they need to send, $30,000. They can go up to send up to $1 million or $5 million in a single transaction. So they're very, very, very large tickets, and we can save them a lot of money. Nonetheless, there are still a lot of retail users that use it for multiple reasons. So there's a couple of users that, hey, they're going to move to Europe or to another country, and they need to pay their university tuition. So they'll send us over the university's information, and we'll pay their tuition. Or there's just people that they don't want to have their money devalued in local currencies, so they'll send it to the US because they have US banking apps or investment platforms, and so on a monthly basis we help them send money from their country over to the US where they invest that money. So it really is like a transactional business model where we get money in one country and we send it off to another. And the same as a business market, as a supermarket, the quicker we rotate our inventory, the more money the company generates. So we're in the game of moving money extremely quickly. That's where we bring a benefit to the financial world.
Yeah, so it's mutually beneficial because the quicker you move the money, the more profit you get, and the quicker people get their money.
Exactly, and we can go focus on another client.
Yeah, I actually have a good example. Moving money, especially for university purposes, was a thorn in my eye for a very long time. I have an older sister. She's still doing her PhD in the UK. And it's just hilarious every time, she's like, oh God, I really quickly need to pay like this big bill. It's my council tax or, my tuition or whatever for this year. And I have a minor panic attack every time because she's not one of the people who gives you a whole lot of notice. She's just like, yeah, it's like due tomorrow. And I'm just like, ugh. And I remember like the first time I had a slight panic attack, we figured it out. But I remember the second time I was thinking of something like, should I just use, what if I use crypto? I will teach her boyfriend how to receive, I don't know, I think I was going to do USDT or something to receive USDT and then how to sell it on an exchange. I was just going full crazy. And it was a huge issue because I needed a person on the other end who can, basically use crypto and not mess it up. And that's not my sister currently. So I guess that's where you guys help people, the little person like me, on a personal finance level, because you just handle that for them, I guess.
Exactly. So, I love crypto because I would consider myself a crypto nerd. Most of the people at Zulu were crypto nerds, and we understand the technology, but we also have to be very honest that there are a lot of complexities in this ecosystem. That's actually one of the reasons why I like Nexo quite a bit, because it's a very easy to use platform compared to a lot of other crypto exchanges out there. Nexo is extremely easy to use. So there's a plugin there. But in terms of these cross-border payments, in theory, anybody in the world can use crypto to solve all of their remittances and payment. But in reality, it becomes a lot more complex because, people have to learn how to store their seed phrases. Plus, they have to understand the difference between a layer 1 and a layer 2 in the blockchains, and what the gas fees are and what a stable coin is, and all of these things, right? So Zulu really simplifies that down. And so basically, what we tell our customers is, look, we are an alternative to a SWIFT payment. We use blockchain technology and stable coins, which is the most secure technology in the world. But you don't have to get your hands dirty using this technology. So what we tell you is send us your local currency and you will receive in the corresponding country local currency. In the middle, there's that bridge where we use crypto and we make things very easy and very quick and very cheap, but you don't have to do anything there. So our users, they don't have to get their hands dirty with blockchains or anything like that. They'll just send us a normal banking transaction, and they'll receive a banking transaction. And that's the way that these businesses and these people have really liked it, because they just ultimately reap the benefits. They don't have to worry at all about their transaction. They just send the money and it arrives in 1 or 2 hours.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, for the end user, it's kind of like the crypto equivalent, or like the cross-border payment equivalent of eliminating the planned delay from booking a low-budget flight. You know, that moment where you get a low-budget flight and you're coming in at 4 and you just tell your mom, you're just like, yeah, come get me at 6 because I know it's going to be late and I know it's going to be a shit show. No shade on low-budget flights. They've gotten me many places, like all of those companies. You're great. I love you. But yeah, it's eliminating the planned delay of cross-border payments. So yeah, speaking of my family, loads of like personal family things. So I was preparing this episode and I was at my family home and my dad was kind of meandering about the living room. And I was just like, I should ask my dad, maybe he'll have a good question because he's into crypto. He's a great guy. I would not be here without him. He's the reason I got into crypto. But yeah, so he actually asked me, he's like, so Zulu, like what percentage roughly of their accounts are business or personal accounts? And the reason he asked was a very interesting kind of thing. I was like, why are you asking? That's like very specific. And he's just like, because I have this feeling that if the majority of businesses in the world start using services like Zulu for cross-border payments, TradFi is going to have a fit, and it might actually like break down to some extent because, that's where the money is with the businesses, with, the big institutions. And, if they're moving into Zulu and doing business that way, what does that mean?
Yeah, that's a very, very, very good question. And I'll give you insights into what this Pareto looks like. So 99.5% of our accounts are retail apps. However, I'll go with 90% of the volume that we move is that 0.5% that are businesses. That's the difference, because retail users, they send very small transactions. They'll send $50, $100, $200. But a business will easily move $10,000 on a bad day, and on a great day they'll move $2 million, right? So I totally agree with your dad in that maybe banks weren't worried with crypto when it comes down to retail, because they're very like microtransactions. But once you start feeding off of their large clients, the ones they really do care about and they give account executives to and everything, that's when I think they'll either start partnering up or adopting this technology, because I really do think that we can be competitive. This just makes a lot of sense for our clients. We tell them, look, this is 5% cheaper than a normal bank, and it's 75% quicker than a bank. There's nothing else. You don't have to worry about anything. You just send us the money. We send it out in the corresponding country. And so when you put that in a comparative chart, it's just a better option. So as Zulu grows, I think banks will take a little bit more notice. And I don't think they'll attack us. I think they'll try to team up with us and figure out a way that we can build this in-house with them. But yeah, in terms of insight for users, that's basically what it comes down to. So I would say that we have, I think, like 70,000 users on our retail app, and then maybe 100 business clients, right? And every single month, maybe we get 5 or 10 new customers on our business side, but they will move so much more money than what we can acquire on the retail side of things. So that's where I think the impact is. And then if you look at the volume of cross-border payments, it's $190 trillion, I think, on a yearly basis, or that'll be what it's going to be in 5 years or something. And then 1.7 trillion of that is just retail. So the other 188 point something trillion dollars, institutions and businesses, right? Small, medium-sized enterprise, but businesses. So I think that's where the real market is.
I'm waiting to see it happen as well. And that was like, you kind of naturally led into something I wanted to ask about, what challenges you're actually seeing with Zulu and with, making these cross-border payments. Are you seeing any pushback anywhere, regulatorily or from other companies?
Yeah, I think well, let's talk about regulation first. So it's not a no-brainer to anybody that regulation isn't clear. And there's a handful of countries that have, if anything, adopted logical regulation towards crypto. And unfortunately, the large countries, they really haven't done anything that is very clear or concise or straightforward towards regulation. But I think that can stab them in the back because, for example, in Colombia, all of the statistics that are used for macroeconomic indicators as to how much money comes in and leaves the country. Well, it's absolutely ignoring everything that happened in crypto. And every single day, and I see this because I can quite literally see the number that we bring in and bring out in Zulu, all of that money gets registered to some government agencies because they accept crypto data. But some agencies, they don't, and they produce economic indicators. So I think in terms of governments, well, they might not need to act on it in terms of regulatory aspects, but they really need to start getting the data because they will make ill-informed decisions if they don't take if they don't see the full picture of what's going on, right? And every single day, crypto will be larger and will move more money, and there will be more companies and more people using it, and they will not have access to that information because they're kind of like turning a blind eye because it's crypto, it's weird, you want to ignore it until it's too big. And then on the institutional side, I guess every day we've seen more banks get into this, but unfortunately, it's not the big banks. So as any crypto company or anybody that's worked in the crypto industry, that you always have to work with the small banks that are a little bit more helpful and willing to work with your compliance team to build out.
Yeah, they're so much more open.
Exactly, and unfortunately, we've had a lot of corporate accounts get blocked with our the venture capital that we've raised at the big name banks just because we're crypto, and then the small guys and I mean that speaks very well towards capitalism and towards a competitive market, because fortunately there's somebody who's small enough that will say, you know what, I'll work with crypto banks or crypto exchanges or whatever, because everybody else is rejecting them. So yeah, I wish these institutions were a little bit more friendly, because that would just make everybody's life a lot more easier, right? If we could work with, the big institutions.
Yeah, and it would be more safe for the end user as well. Like they'd be working with both on a really, really established institution and, like a cutting edge, innovative, crypto firm. I'm waiting for them to kind of break the ice and come around.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I had something else to say about, I think, pushback and challenges. And it was, again, specifically to Latin America. I don't know, maybe you heard that a bunch of the fintech associations in Latin America, I think it was from Colombia, Chile, Peru, and Mexico. Mexico is the last one. They published like a landmark joint standards for open. It's a landmark joint standards for open finance. That's what it is. And I think that was like a real milestone for the Latin American market. Like, do you actually feel like, given that Zulu is from Colombia, something like that will actually propel regulation in the region more, and you'll be able to operate more freely?
Well, I haven't actually reviewed that specific proposal, but speaking based on history and anecdote, Colombia, Peru, and Chile, if there's not maybe a fourth country in there, integrated their.
It was Mexico.
No, but this is another example. They integrated their stock exchanges, and I'm fairly sure they signed that agreement more than 8 or 9 years ago. I still don't know if that is operational. So I love when countries work together, but I also know that they're extremely bureaucratic and can be very slow to roll out these things. And that's in terms of the stock exchanges, and there's some reasons why that happened. Hopefully, with open finance and open banking, it'll be a lot quicker. Unfortunately, there has been like some positive movements. The Colombian president at least passed a tax reform which basically forced this into the market. So it might not have the same benchmark as the other countries, but at least making it a standard and something that has to happen will be very, very, very good.
That's awesome. So there is light in the tunnel, even though it might be a little bit slow, a little bit of Latin American punctuality for you there.
Exactly.
I know that was a bit, I don't know, xenophobic. Sorry, guys.
No. It's very
no. I mean, I'm Eastern European, and we're also notoriously non-punctual. So yeah. Just
Yeah, I will accept that's a very true remark on Latin American people. We are very, very, very unlike. Whenever I have friends from either the US or Europe in Colombia, I have to explain to them that I mean, in business sense, you do show up on time. In other
yeah.
aspects of your life, it would be awkward if you showed up on time. You could not show up on time to a party, or you will absolutely be alone for the first hour of that party.
I know. I get so much shit for that. I just like, I'll show up to a party 15 minutes late thinking, just like, oh my God, I'm late. And they're just like, what is wrong with you? Like,
Exactly.
yeah, it's the same here. Well, since this is the social block and like we don't want to just talk about the financial side of crypto, I thought we could travel a little bit towards maybe a little bit of a different question about what kind of other cross-border transactions blockchain could facilitate beyond just money payments. I have a couple examples, but what are you thinking?
Run me through your examples so I can get a little bit of inspiration.
Okay. Well, the first one is, I'll just go ahead and like present them first, and then we can like talk about what comes in mind. So the first one I was thinking is obviously like identities and like, the passport, travel situation, like literally that moment where you're at the physical border and, your passport, your little literal physical book is the way that, these institutions verify who you are, and then they go into their systems. And I just don't really feel like that's all too efficient. And I feel like if we could do that through blockchain, we could also use zero knowledge to protect people's identity at borders while, making us more able to go from place to place. I just think like for visas and stuff, that would be so much better. The second example is like, I actually have a meme for this that I prepared that I'm going to try and show you. It's to do with supply chains, because you know how like the food we consume, for example, it goes everywhere. And like, there's this really famous meme here. I hope you guys can see it, right? Have you seen this? So it's like basically a bunch of canned pears, and it says pears grown in Argentina, packaged in Thailand. And then the little map shows you that they're bought in the US. And I'm just like, efficiency. This is efficiency. Yeah. So beyond this, clearly being the pinnacle of efficiency for the world. We ship pears from Argentina all the way to package them in Thailand and then back to the US. Yes. That's a really long way to go. And that's food. And if you're anything like me, you'll be like, I want to kind of know where this food has been. And like, you've written it on the package, but I don't know when these pears were born in Argentina, at what point they got to Thailand, and in what condition. And I think like blockchain could help us trace them. They could help us eliminate defective products earlier along the supply chain. You would know what stayed where for how long. Like, even just like, honestly, if you're a health freak, this would be good. But if you're a hypochondriac, maybe that would be a bit of an issue. But I think it would also make supply chains more efficient, I guess.
I have a couple of examples, and one of them is something that happened to me as a first-hand experience. So I did a couple of years ago a program at a European university at HEC in Paris, and they emitted my certificate in finance on a blockchain. So when I was validating those credits in Colombia at my local university, I had to explain to them that this was posted on a blockchain and how, it's not like an Ethereum blockchain, it's a private blockchain, but that it is validated through a node system and through a blockchain system. And, you can go into this database and see, okay, Esteban, if it, effectively did this course and got these credits. And
this is legitimate. Yeah.
Exactly.
The blockchain is the thing that like verifies the validity of your degree, essentially. Right? It
could evolve into that. It could evolve into that. Not in the current state of things, but in a private sense, I think it could work. And exactly what you're talking about with visas, that would make sense, because so if you're getting a visa for one of these, and I quote for people that are listening in audio, prestigious countries, they will really want to know what university you graduated, right? If you're getting a US visa, they'll really want to know if you did a bachelor's, if you did a master's, a PhD, where you got it from. That'll kind of like up you up in the ranking amongst your peers. So it would be very easy if you could validate that. And especially in Latin American countries, we have an extreme case of bureaucracy, right? So if you want to validate a title from another country, it is extremely annoying because you would have to go back to that country, get your title. It has to like be signed by the dean of the university. It has to be notarized and sent back, and then it has to be translated if it's another language, and that translation has to be notarized. Crazy.
I know this pain because I actually have 2 certificates for the 3rd grade, 2 for the 5th grade, and 2 for the 11th grade, because we moved around so much when I was a little kid that this had happened all the time. Like you have to, the notary, the dean, the translation, and it all just goes to shit. Like I remember my dad in South Africa, he had to like go and get our like certificates notarized for me and my sister. And he was just like, I was just going into this building and there's this huge queue. And I was like, I genuinely didn't know if I was ever going to come out of there at this point. Like it took forever. So yeah, like, can you just imagine like the blockchain being the verifying factor rather than all of these other institutions that are just everywhere?
Yeah, exactly. It would cut down on so many annoying things about bureaucracy. And I think it's kind of like a little bit of like power towards the people, because you can really say, like, you can have the physical title and the physical paper that has, the specific ink and the type of paper and all of that. But it'd be cool if you could carry that digitally and really show it to anywhere that you want to go. Be like, hey, I have, these credentials that prove that I actually have these certificates. So I think that's one point. But I
went to school, I promise.
Exactly. And I wanted to talk on something that was released this week, which is WorldCoin. And I think there's huge social question as to whether people should be scanning their facial identification, and I think that's something that people are going to be hesitant with right now, but will eventually get more used to it in the coming years.
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, I guess there has to be some kind of transition from this, what we've got now, verifying our identities, our education and everything, and then like moving on to a blockchain based kind of verification of that. There has to be some kind of on-ramp. We're not going to just like magically be like, okay, this is your NFT ID card and everyone should believe it, because that's just dangerous for everybody.
Yeah. If you don't know how to store your 12 word phrase or your seed phrase, and that's to somebody that knows about crypto, it's going to be extremely complex to get my grandmother there into this. So that there has to be better solutions. But effectively, blockchain would be the most ideal technology to really prove many things about your life that you want to share, that are necessary, right? Think about your digital identity, not having to carry a physical ID card or a physical driver's license, right? Or if you rent a car in another country, your driver's license will be valid in that country because it's on a system that other people can recognize and identify. So there are some use cases out there. I don't know who's going to build them, but for sure, there are a lot of people that would enjoy the benefits from it.
Yeah, I feel like what we're kind of moving from, and like just to kind of go back to the financial example and like the whole Zulus cross-border payments, uses, I was thinking what banks have got going on, their system is just not efficient anymore. It's a centralized system kind of between them. And then like it centralizes basically that kind of power and execution in separate banks, separate institutions. But then like what we're moving towards, it would seem, with these cross-border payments and all sorts of other cross-border transactions, be they for education, identity, supply chains, pairs, it would be using blockchain as like a more unified system for everybody. Like, it's unlikely that the whole world is going to use the same blockchain, but I guess we could build bridges and everything. But I just feel like blockchain is so good because it's both decentralized, but it can also serve as a unified system that's available and unbiased to everyone, regulation willing, of course, because if you aren't legally allowed to use a blockchain in a country, but the blockchain itself will not discriminate, which is great. So It's this democratization while unifying the system, the underlying system that we're using in our societies. I think that was kind of like my last words for this topic, actually. I wanted to ask you, since we're kind of nearing the end of the episode, what's your takeaway from all this? What are your final thoughts? What do you want to tell people?
Yeah, I want to tell one small anecdote now that you're talking about, like how big this can be, and the value of it being decentralized. So back in 2019, I opened up a small deposit bank account in Colombia with a very large startup, and it was like their new fintech vertical, whatever. And so I put maybe 50 euros in local currency on that platform, and one day I just reloaded my account and the money is gone, and there's no incoming, outgoing transaction. It literally just disappeared from their database. You couldn't even see the transaction where I topped up. And so I text customer support like, hey, I had this money here and it's not there. And they tell me, no, you have no, there's no financial movements in your account. You haven't topped up anything in this last week. There's no registration of you having done that. Obviously, it was somebody in there. It must have been fired. Somebody in their analytics or their data team that must have screwed up the database, because effectively 2 months later, the money reappeared into my account, and there was no comment, no email, no nothing. But somebody must have noticed 2 months later, shit, we totally missed out on this period of time in our database.
Let's just put this money here really quietly and then go away.
Exactly. So I think
oh my God, that's so bad.
Where when I started learning about crypto, I said, wow, this, I mean, you obviously hear the stories of like, hey, this is again, if you use crypto, like this will make you independent from like government control and bank control. And I don't think governments and banks are going to be that evil, but it has happened to me on a personal level that it wasn't the bank trying to be evil. Somebody in their data room screwed up, missed my transaction, and for 2 months I did not have access to that money. It wasn't $1 million. It wasn't it was 50 euros, which is still a lot of money, but I could live without the 50 euros. But what if that did happen on a larger scale, right? What if you have some financial transactions that you really did not do, and they show up in your account, and the bank has no evidence to support that you didn't do those transactions? So that's why I really like crypto, because you can really like have your own thing, and it's the blockchain. You can't mess that up.
Yeah, you depend on you essentially and the blockchain, but the blockchain doesn't stab you in the back or take away your money and then quietly give it back without telling you that it's done so.
Exactly.
I'm telling you, it's the intern, I'm sure.
I'm fairly sure somebody was fired up for it, because if I had 50 euros on the account, I mean, against their 100,000 users at that point, there must have been a lot of users that were like wondering, hey, where are my 5 euros, my 1 euro, stuff like that. And it must have added up to quite a bit of money.
There's people who can't live without those 50 euros. And like, it's not necessarily like that you have to be super poor for that. But like, what if you're a student and those are your last 50 euros for the month? Been there.
It can really screw you over.
Yeah, I ate rice and powdered sugar for 3 days. That was fun. But anyway, yeah, my anecdote is not as bad as yours. Mine was like, we found the money.
Yeah. So that's kind of the beauty of the blockchain, and that's why we started working. That's why I started working on this. Because I really do think you can democratize a lot of things. I would see at UBS how, quite literally like, multimillionaires and billionaires have access to anything, right? Obviously, because they have so much money that it makes sense for you to work with these types of clients. But then you go down to the immigrant and you're like, oh, these people have no dollars. They have zero money. They have negative money coming into these countries. So it was really beautiful, although maybe wasn't as successful as we wanted it to be. It was nice knowing that, we started with this origin story and that people can still use it. If you're a Venezuelan immigrant, you can still use our app and send money between Colombia and Venezuela, and it's completely free. Or from Mexico to Venezuela, it's completely free. There's quite literally no fee on that transaction. So I think there's a lot of beauty to it, and maybe AI is the new and sexy stuff right now. But I do think crypto still has a lot of value that has been untouched and will be evolving in the next couple of years.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks so much, Esteban. And I hope to catch you later in the crypto space, maybe at a conference or something.
Perfect. Well, Magy, thank you so much for the interview and for the time.
Yeah, thanks. Bye-bye.
Have a great one. Bye-bye.